A tired, stoic man stood at the heart of the bustling Greenville Community Center, his eyes softened by memories that held both victories and scars. It was meant to be a simple evening, a chance to reconnect, to share a few words of wisdom with those who valued the lessons of life and resilience. The walls of this place reflected the respect for those who'd served, those who'd sacrificed. For Samuel Carter, this wasn't just any gathering. It was a place of pride, a reminder that his battles had meant something. It was one of the few places he felt seen, not just as an elderly man, but as the hero he had once been. The conversations and laughter that filled the room had an undercurrent of respect. Samuel's presence commanded attention, though he never sought it. Dressed in a simple dark sweater and slacks, his broad shoulders carried the weight of years past. He stood with quiet dignity, a living testament to perseverance. But then, piercing through the warmth of the evening, came a sharp voice, mocking, loaded with the weight of authority misused. "Hey, old man, shouldn't you be somewhere else?" The words landed like a slap in the face, silencing the chatter around him. Heads turned, the room now thick with tension. Some stared, others looked away, unsure of what to do. Officer Brandon Miles, a young man in his early 30s, strode forward. His badge glinted under the overhead lights, a symbol of power he carried with arrogance. His uniform was crisp, his boots polished, and his face wore a smirk that dared anyone to question him. He was the type who thrived on control, on bending others to his will. Brandon saw only an elderly black man standing in a place he believed he didn't belong. He didn't see the history etched in Samuel's weathered face, the battles fought long before he was born, or the strength it took to stand there unbowed. He saw only someone he could intimidate. "You think you can just hang around here?" Brandon sneered, taking another step closer. "This isn't a place for people like you." The words hung in the air, slicing through the respect Samuel had earned. He straightened slightly, his hands resting on the back of a nearby chair for balance. The room was silent, the weight of humiliation settling heavily. Samuel's voice, when he finally spoke, was steady, devoid of anger, but laced with quiet resolve. "I have every right to be here." Brandon scoffed, his disdain evident. "Right," he said with a bitter laugh. "People like you think you have rights." And then, as if to punctuate his statement, Brandon reached out and shoved Samuel. The action was sharp, jarring, sending Samuel stumbling back. Gasps echoed through the room, a ripple of shock spreading among the onlookers. Samuel caught himself against the chair, refusing to fall. He straightened, his face calm, but his eyes filled with a quiet fury that he kept carefully restrained. Years of training, decades of discipline, whispered to him to stay steady, to wait. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield far from home. This was his community, his sanctuary. The people around him watched with wide eyes, their expressions a mix of shame, anger, and fear. Samuel could feel their silent plea for him to stand firm, to push back against the injustice they all saw. "You don't know who you're talking to," Samuel said softly, his voice carrying a quiet strength that made Brandon pause for a moment. "Oh, I think I know exactly who you are," Brandon replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "You're just another troublemaker who thinks they deserve respect." Samuel's jaw tightened as he met Brandon's gaze. For a brief moment, he stood taller, his presence commanding, and he let the years fall away. His voice, deliberate and firm, cut through the tension. "Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn." Brandon laughed harshly, dismissing the words with a wave of his hand. "You think you've earned anything? You're just an old man clinging to a past that doesn't matter anymore." The room bristled with unease, but no one dared to step in. The power dynamic between the two men felt insurmountable, but Samuel refused to waver. His eyes never left Brandon's, and his voice grew stronger. "I've earned more than you'll ever understand." Brandon's arrogance faltered for a split second, a flicker of insecurity crossing his face. But he recovered quickly, leaning closer to Samuel, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You're going to regret that." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was broken by the murmurs of those gathered. People began to step closer, their faces etched with quiet determination. Brandon looked around, sensing the shift in the room, the way the crowd's loyalty was aligning with Samuel. The officer stepped back, his confidence shaken, but not gone. "You'll see," Brandon muttered before turning sharply and walking out, his boots echoing against the floor. Samuel remained where he was, his grip on the chair tightening as he steadied himself. The whispers in the room grew louder, a hum of disbelief and outrage. A few people approached him, their faces filled with concern. "Mr. Carter," a young man named Elijah said, his voice trembling with emotion. "What he did was wrong. We can't just let this go." Samuel gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Thank you, son, but sometimes the best response is to stand firm and let the truth speak for itself." But even as he spoke the words, Samuel felt a shift within himself. The encounter had stirred something deep, a memory of battles fought not just on foreign soil, but here, at home, in a society that had too often denied his worth. He knew this wasn't over. Over the following days, the incident lingered in the community like a shadow. People whispered about it on street corners, in coffee shops, and at church gatherings. Some approached Samuel with words of support, while others expressed their anger and frustration at the injustice. But Samuel remained composed, his calm exterior hiding the storm brewing inside. One evening, as he prepared to lead a discussion at the community center, Samuel noticed the energy in the room was different. People weren't just here to listen, they were here to stand with him. Margaret Green, an elder in the community who had known Samuel for years, approached him. "Samuel," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm, "we're not going to let what happened go unnoticed. That officer needs to be held accountable." Samuel nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "Thank you, Margaret, but this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. We have to stand together if we want things to change." The community began to organize. Stories of Officer Miles's behavior surfaced, accounts of intimidation, unnecessary force, and abuse of power. People shared their experiences, their voices growing louder, their resolve strengthening. At the next town hall meeting, the room was packed. Samuel stood among his neighbors, his presence a symbol of their collective strength. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped forward, his voice steady but powerful. "I've lived in this neighborhood for decades," he began, his words resonating through the room. "I've seen its struggles, its triumphs, and its growth, and I've always believed in the strength of this community. But respect, true respect, cannot coexist with fear. Authority should protect us, not diminish us. And it's time we demand better." The room erupted in applause, the energy electric. Brandon, sitting at the back, glared at Samuel, his face dark with anger. But the crowd's support for Samuel was undeniable. As he stepped down, people approached him, their gratitude evident in their expressions. In the weeks that followed, the community's efforts gained momentum. They documented their experiences, submitted complaints, and demanded action from local leaders. The pressure mounted, and eventually an investigation into Brandon's conduct was launched. The findings were damning, and the officer was removed from his position. For Samuel, the victory was bittersweet. It wasn't about personal vindication, but about ensuring that his community would no longer live in fear. As he resumed his quiet life, leading discussions at the community center and walking the familiar streets of Greenville, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The respect he had earned over a lifetime was now amplified by the unity he had inspired in those around him. The community had changed, not just in policy, but in spirit. And Samuel, with his quiet strength and unwavering dignity, remained at its heart, a reminder that resilience and integrity could overcome even the deepest injustices.